Little girl went to feed the pigs and didn't return. Police officer notices something and calls 911. Before we dive into the story, drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Enjoy the story. The sun hadn't fully risen over the valley yet, but Clara May was already awake. At 67 years old, her body didn't allow her the luxury of sleeping in anymore. The arthritis in her hands reminded her of that every morning as she gripped the handle of the old coffee pot, the kind that sat directly on the wood-burning stove. The farmhouse was quiet except for the familiar creaking of the floorboards and the distant crowing of the rooster. Clara poured herself a cup of coffee, black and strong, just the way she'd been drinking it for 50 years. She stood by the window, looking out at the barn and the chicken coop, at the fields that seemed to stretch endlessly under the pale morning light. This land had been in her family for 3 generations. Now it was just her and the 3 grandchildren. "Grandma?" A small voice came from the doorway. Clara turned to see Lily, the youngest, rubbing her eyes. She was only 7, with tangled blonde hair and bare feet. "Morning, sweetheart," Clara said softly. "You're up early." "I heard the chickens," Lily said, shuffling over to hug Clara's leg. Clara smiled and stroked her hair. "Go wash your face. Breakfast will be ready soon." As Lily disappeared down the hallway, Clara's gaze drifted back to the window. Somewhere out there, Emily was probably already awake too. That girl had always been an early riser, especially when it came to the animals. Emily was 12 now, quiet, thoughtful, and more responsible than any child her age should have to be. Clara's daughter, Emily's mother, had been hospitalized. 2 years ago, schizophrenia, the doctor said, untreated for too long. Now Clara was raising 3 grandchildren on her own, with nothing but a small pension and the stubbornness that ran in her blood. By 7 o'clock, the kitchen smelled like scrambled eggs and toast. The 2 boys, Caleb and Jamie, came stumbling in, arguing about something trivial. Clara set the plates down with a firm hand. "Sit, eat, no fighting at the table." They obeyed immediately, but Emily's chair remained empty. Clara glanced at the clock. It wasn't like Emily to miss breakfast. She was usually the first one. There, helping set the table without being asked. "Where's your sister?" Clara asked. Caleb shrugged. "Probably with the pigs. You know how she is." Clara nodded, though something in her chest tightened. She told herself it was nothing. Emily loved those animals. She'd probably lost track of time. Still, as the minutes passed and the chair stayed empty, Clara felt the unease growing. "Finish your food," she told the children. "I'm going to check on her." She grabbed her worn jacket from the hook by the door and stepped outside. The morning air was cool, carrying the scent of damp earth and hay. The old radio inside was playing a gospel song, crackling through the static. Clara walked slowly toward the barn, her joints protesting with every step. The gravel crunched under her boots. Chickens scattered as she passed. "Emily?" she called out. No answer. The barn door was slightly ajar. Clara pushed it open, and the smell of straw and animals filled her lungs. "Emily, honey, you in here?" Silence. Clara walked deeper inside, past the empty stalls, past the feed bag stacked against the wall. She could hear the pigs grunting in the pen outside, but there was no sign of the girl. Then she saw it. A bucket overturned, scattered feed on the ground, and Emily's shoes, muddy, small, sitting by the gate to the pig pen. Clara's heart began to pound. Emily! She hurried as fast as her old legs would carry her, pushing through the gate. The pigs snorted and moved aside. And there, in the corner of the pen, half hidden by the shadows, was Emily. She was lying on her side, unconscious, her clothes covered in dirt and straw. Clara dropped to her knees beside her, her hands shaking as she reached for the girl's face. "Emily, baby, wake up. Please, wake up." But Emily didn't move. And that's when Clara saw it, something that made her blood run cold. There was blood, not much but enough, and beside Emily, wrapped in an old feed sack, something small, something alive. Clara's breath caught in her throat. She pulled the sack aside with trembling hands and stared in disbelief. Clara's scream tore through the morning silence. It wasn't a scream of pain. It was something deeper, something primal. The kind of sound that comes from a place beyond words, beyond logic. The neighbor, Hank Morrison, was fixing his fence 2 properties over when he heard it. He dropped his tools and ran. Hank was 63, a retired police officer who'd moved to the countryside to escape the chaos of the city. But the instincts never left him. When he heard that scream, he knew something was terribly wrong. He found Clara in the pig pen, clutching Emily's limp body, rocking back and forth. Her face was pale, her lips moving in silent prayer. "Clara, what happened?" She looked up at him, eyes wild with terror. "Hank, I don't understand." That's when he saw the baby, tiny, fragile, still connected by the umbilical cord. Hank's training kicked in immediately. He pulled off his jacket and wrapped it around the infant, then knelt beside Emily, checking her pulse. "She's breathing," he said, his voice steady despite the shock coursing through him. "But we need to get them to the hospital. Now." Clara couldn't move. She just stared at the baby in Hank's arms, her mind refusing to accept what her eyes were seeing. "Clara!" Hank's voice was sharp. "I need you to focus. Can you walk?" She nodded slowly, still in a daze. "Good. Get inside. Call 911. Tell them we need an ambulance immediately. Go." Clara stumbled to her feet and ran, or tried to. Her knees buckled halfway, but she caught herself on the fence and kept moving. Her heart was pounding so hard she thought it might burst. Inside the house, the children were still at the table, confused by the commotion. "Grandma, what's wrong?" Caleb asked. Clara grabbed the phone with shaking hands and dialed. Her voice cracked as she spoke to the dispatcher. "My granddaughter. Please, we need help. The old Morrison farm off Route 9, please hurry." She hung up and turned to the children, forcing herself to stay calm. "Go to your rooms. Now. Don't come out until I say so." "But now!" They obeyed, their faces pale with fear. Clara ran back outside. Hank had carried Emily out of the pen and laid her on the grass. The baby was crying now, a weak, raspy sound that made Clara's stomach twist. "How is this possible?" Clara whispered, kneeling beside them. "She's just a child. How did I not know?" Hank didn't answer. He was focused on keeping Emily stable, checking her breathing, watching for signs of shock. The ambulance arrived within 15 minutes, though it felt like an eternity. The paramedics moved quickly, efficiently, loading Emily onto a stretcher. One of them carefully took the baby from Hank, cutting the cord and wrapping the infant in a thermal blanket. "Ma'am, are you the grandmother?" one of them asked. Clara nodded, unable to speak. "We need to take them both to County General. Do you want to ride with us?" She nodded again. Hank put a hand on her shoulder. "I'll stay with the other kids. You go. I'll explain everything to them." Clara looked at him, tears streaming down her face. "I don't even know what to tell them, Hank. I don't know what's happening." "We'll figure it out," he said gently. "Just go. Be with her." The ride to the hospital was a blur. Clara sat in the back of the ambulance watching the paramedics work on Emily. The girl was still unconscious, her face pale and lifeless. The baby lay in an incubator beside her, tiny fists clenched, eyes closed. Clara reached out and touched Emily's hand. It was cold. "Please," she whispered. "Please be okay." At the hospital, everything moved too fast. Doctors and nurses swarmed around Emily, shouting medical terms Clara didn't understand. Someone asked her questions. When did this happen? Did she know Emily was pregnant? How far along was she? Clara couldn't answer. She just stood there, numb, staring at the chaos unfolding before her. A doctor finally approached her, a woman in her 40s with tired eyes and a clipboard in her hand. "Mrs. May?" Clara nodded. "I'm Dr. Sanders. Your granddaughter is stable for now, but we need to run some tests. The baby appears healthy, though premature. We're taking them both to intensive care." "I didn't know," Clara said, her voice breaking. "I swear I didn't know she was pregnant." Dr. Sanders's expression softened slightly. How old is Emily? 12. She just turned 12. The doctor's face tightened. She glanced at her clipboard, then back at Clara. Mrs. May, we're going to need to involve Child Protective Services. This is a mandatory report. Clara felt the floor shift beneath her. What? No, I would never. I understand, Dr. Sanders said carefully. But we have to follow protocol. A child. This isn't something that happens by accident. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Clara sank into a chair, her hands covering her face. Somewhere down the hall, the baby cried. The waiting room was cold and sterile, filled with the hum of fluorescent lights and the occasional beep of a monitor down the hall. Clara sat alone, her hands folded tightly in her lap, staring at the worn linoleum floor. Hours passed, or maybe it was minutes. Time didn't seem to work properly anymore. A nurse came by twice to offer her water. Clara refused both times. She couldn't swallow. Her throat felt like it was closing. Finally, Dr. Sanders returned. This time, she wasn't alone. A woman in a gray suit followed her, carrying a leather folder. Mrs. May, this is Linda Harris from Child Protective Services, Dr. Sanders said. Linda extended her hand. Clara stared at it for a moment before shaking it weakly. Mrs. May, I know this is an incredibly difficult time, Linda began, her tone professional but not unkind. But I need to ask you some questions. Clara nodded numbly. Linda sat down beside her, opening her folder. When did you first notice that Emily might be pregnant? I didn't, Clara said, her voice hollow. I had no idea. Did she gain weight, change her clothing habits, show any signs of discomfort? Clara thought back, desperately searching her memory. Emily had been wearing looser clothes lately, but Clara had just assumed it was a phase. The girl had always been modest. She wore bigger shirts, Clara admitted. But I thought she was just growing. Kids do that. Linda wrote something down. Did Emily have any visitors? Anyone who came to the house regularly? Clara hesitated. My neighbor, Hank Morrison. He helps with repairs sometimes, and there's a man who does odd jobs around the farm. Tom Bradley. He's been helping us for about a year now. Anyone else? The pastor from church stops by once in a while, and the mailman, of course. But that's it. We don't have many visitors. Linda nodded, making more notes. Mrs. May, I need to be very clear with you. Given Emily's age, this is a criminal matter. The hospital has reported this to the police. They'll want to speak with you and Emily when she wakes up. Clara's chest tightened. Criminal? But I didn't do anything. I understand that, Linda said gently. But someone did, and we need to find out who. Dr. Sanders cleared her throat. Mrs. May, Emily is awake now. She's asking for you. Clara stood up so quickly she felt dizzy. Can I see her? Yes, but only for a few minutes. She's very weak, and we need to keep her calm. Linda stood. Well, I'll need to be present during the conversation. Clara wanted to argue, but she didn't have the strength. She just nodded and followed them down the hallway. Emily's room was small and dimly lit. Machines beeped softly beside the bed. The girl lay propped up against pillows, an IV attached to her arm. She looked impossibly small, like a child playing dress-up in a hospital gown. When she saw Clara, tears filled her eyes. Grandma. Clara rushed to her side, gripping her hand. Oh, baby, I'm here. I'm right here. Emily sobbed quietly, her thin shoulders shaking. I'm so sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry. Shh, Clara said, smoothing her hair. You don't have to apologize. Just rest. But Emily shook her head. I didn't know what to do. I was scared. Linda stepped closer, her voice soft but firm. Emily, I'm Ms. Harris. I'm here to help you. Can you tell me? What happened? Who did this to you? Emily's face crumpled. She looked at Clara, then at Linda, then down at her hands. I can't. Why not, sweetheart? Linda asked gently. Because, Emily's voice was barely a whisper. Because everyone will hate me. Clara felt her heart shatter. No one will hate you, she said fiercely. Emily, listen to me. This is not your fault. Do you hear me? This is not your fault. But Emily just cried harder. Dr. Sanders stepped in. That's enough for now. She needs rest. Linda nodded reluctantly. We'll talk again later. As they left the room, Clara glanced back at Emily. The girl had turned her face to the wall, her small frame trembling under the thin hospital blanket. In the hallway, Linda pulled Clara aside. Mrs. May, I need to tell you something. The baby is being placed in temporary foster care until we can determine custody. What? Clara's voice rose. You can't do that. That's my great-grandchild. I understand, but given the circumstances— What circumstances? I didn't do anything wrong. Linda's expression was sympathetic but unyielding. Mrs. May, Emily is a minor who was impregnated while under your care. Until we can confirm that your home is safe, we can't place the baby with you. Clara felt the room spinning. This can't be happening, she whispered. Linda placed a hand on her shoulder. I'm not the enemy here, but we have protocols. I'll do everything I can to make sure this gets resolved quickly. In the, meantime, focus on Emily. She needs you. Clara nodded slowly, though she felt like she was drowning. As she walked back toward Emily's room, she passed a window overlooking the parking lot. Down below, she saw a police car pulling into the lot, and her blood ran cold. Because she knew exactly what came next. The questions, the accusations, the looks of judgment. And somewhere, buried deep in her mind, a terrible thought began to take shape. Who could have done this? The answer was out there. And when she found it, nothing would ever be the same. Clara didn't sleep that night. She sat in the hospital chair beside Emily's bed, watching the girl's chest rise and fall in the dim light. The machines beeped their steady rhythm, a reminder that life continued even when the world felt like it had stopped. Outside, the sun began to rise, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Clara stared at it through the window, her mind drifting back through the past year, searching for answers she'd missed. How did I not see it? She thought about the mornings when Emily would slip out before dawn to feed the animals. Clara had always admired her granddaughter's dedication, never questioning why the girl spent so much time alone in the barn. She thought about the baggy sweatshirts Emily had started wearing, even in the summer heat. Clara had assumed it was teenage modesty, a phase all girls went through. She thought about the way Emily had grown quieter over the months, retreating into herself. Clara had chalked it up to missing her mother, to the stress of growing up too fast. I should have known. The guilt was overwhelming, pressing down on her chest like a physical weight. A soft knock on the door pulled Clara from her thoughts. A young nurse entered, checking Emily's vitals with practiced efficiency. She's doing well, the nurse said quietly. Strong girl. Clara nodded, unable to speak. After the nurse left, Clara reached over and gently brushed a strand of hair from Emily's face. The girl stirred slightly but didn't wake. I'm so sorry, baby, Clara whispered. I should have protected you. By mid-morning, Hank arrived with clean clothes and a thermos of coffee. He found Clara still sitting in the same chair, looking exhausted. You need to eat something, he said, setting down a paper bag. Brought you a sandwich. I'm not hungry. Clara. His voice was firm. You're no good to anyone if you collapse. Eat. She took the sandwich reluctantly, forcing herself to take a bite even though it tasted like cardboard. Hank pulled up another chair and sat beside her. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The other kids are asking? Questions, he finally said. I told them Emily was sick and needed to stay at the hospital for a while. They don't know about the rest. Clara closed her eyes. How am I supposed to tell them? You don't, not yet. Right now, you focus on Emily. She looked at him, tears forming again. The police came last night. They asked me so many questions, Hank. They looked at me like I was a criminal. They're just doing their job. They wanted to know who had access to the house, who Emily spent time with. She paused, her voice dropping to a whisper. They mentioned Tom. Hank's expression darkened. Tom Bradley, Clara nodded. Tom was a drifter who'd shown up about a year ago looking for work. He'd seemed harmless enough, quiet, polite, always offering to help with repairs. Clara had been grateful for the extra hands, especially with her arthritis getting worse. He's been around a lot, Clara said slowly. Fixing the roof, mending fences. Emily would be outside sometimes when he was working. Hank leaned forward. Did you ever see anything suspicious? Anything that made you uncomfortable? Clara tried to remember, but everything felt foggy. He was always nice to her. Maybe too nice. He'd bring her candy sometimes or help her carry the feed bags. The words felt like poison in her mouth. I thought he was just being kind, she whispered. Hank's jaw tightened. Where is he now? I don't know. He was supposed to come by last week to fix the water heater, but he never showed up. They sat in heavy silence. Finally, Hank stood. I'm going to make some calls, see what I can find out. Hank. He turned back. What if it wasn't him? Clara's voice trembled. What if it was someone else? Someone we haven't even thought of? Hank's expression was grim. Then we keep looking until we find them. By the time Clara returned home 2 days later, the entire town knew. Small towns had a way of spreading news faster than wildfire, and this story was too scandalous to keep quiet. Clara could feel it the moment Hank drove her down Main Street. The stares, the whispers, the sudden silence when they passed. At the grocery store, Mrs. Patterson from the church choir pretended not to see her. At the post office, the clerk handed her the mail without making eye contact, but it was at Henderson's feed store where Clara heard it clearly. She was picking up chicken feed when 2 women rounded the corner, not realizing she was there. Did you hear about Clara May's granddaughter? One of them said in a hushed voice. Terrible thing. Just terrible. I always said something wasn't right in that house. 3 kids and an old woman. How was she supposed to keep track of them all? She should have known. A child doesn't get pregnant without someone noticing. Clara stood frozen, the bag of feed heavy in her arms. Poor girl, the first woman continued. But honestly, where was the grandmother? Out working the farm, probably, while that child was… Clara dropped the bag. It hit the floor with a loud thud. Both women turned, their faces flushing red when they saw her. Clara, we didn't… But Clara was already walking away, her hands shaking, her vision blurred with tears. That Sunday, Clara didn't go to church. She'd attended that church for 40 years, through weddings and funerals, through good times and bad. But when she imagined walking through those doors, facing those judgmental eyes, she couldn't do it. Instead, she sat at the kitchen table, staring at the old radio that crackled with a gospel hymn. Hank stopped by in the afternoon, his expression troubled. You okay? Clara shook her head. No, I'm really not. He sat down across from her. I talked to some people. Tom Bradley left town 3 days ago. No forwarding address, no explanation. Clara's stomach dropped. It means the police are looking for him. They've issued a bulletin. She buried her face in her hands. Everyone thinks it's my fault, Hank. They think I'm a negligent grandmother who let this happen. Clara. No, they're right. Her voice broke. I should have seen it. I should have protected her. Hank reached across the table and gripped her hand. Firmly. Listen to me. You did the best you could with what you had. You were taking care of 3 kids on your own, keeping a farm running with arthritis in your hands. You can't blame yourself for the evil someone else did. But Clara couldn't hear him. The guilt was too loud. The next day, Linda Harris from Child Protective Services came by for a home inspection. She walked through every room with a clipboard, making notes. She checked the bedrooms, the kitchen, the bathroom. She asked questions about income, about supervision, about daily routines. Clara answered as best she could, but she felt like she was on trial. When Linda finally left, she said only, "I'll be in touch." That night, Clara sat on the porch as the sun set over the fields. The chickens had gone to roost. The pigs were quiet in their pen. Everything looked the same as it always had, but nothing would ever be the same again. In the distance, a car drove slowly past the farm. Clara couldn't see who was inside, but she felt their eyes on her. Judging, always judging. She pulled her sweater tighter around her shoulders and whispered into the empty air, "I'm sorry, Emily. I'm so sorry." Clara couldn't remember the last time she'd cried this much. She sat alone in the barn, the place where she'd found Emily just days ago. The straw still bore faint traces of what had happened, dark stains she couldn't bring herself to clean yet. Her hands trembled as she held an old photograph she'd found tucked in Emily's dresser drawer. It showed the girl at age 7 grinning with a missing front tooth, holding a baby chick in her small hands. Back then, everything had been simpler. Back then, Clara had believed she could protect them all. Where did I go wrong? The question haunted her every waking moment. She thought about the nights she'd gone to bed early, exhausted from the farm work, trusting that the children were safe in their rooms. She thought about the times she'd sent Emily outside to do chores alone because her own body hurt too much to help. She thought about Tom Bradley's friendly smile, the way he'd offered to help without being asked, the way she'd been so grateful for his presence. I let a monster into our home. The realization made her physically ill. Clara's coffee sat cold and forgotten on an overturned bucket beside her. She'd poured it hours ago, back when the sun was just rising. Now it was mid-morning and she hadn't moved. The barn door creaked open. Hank stepped inside, his boots crunching on the straw. "Thought I might find you here," he said quietly. Clara didn't look up. "I keep thinking about all the signs I missed. The way she stopped singing while she worked. The way she flinched when someone came up behind her. How she started locking her bedroom door at night." Hank sat down on a hay bale across from her. "You couldn't have known." "But I should have," Clara's voice cracked. "I'm her grandmother. I'm supposed to keep her safe. That's my job, my only job. And I failed." "Clara, do you know what the worst part is?" Tears streamed down her face. She went through all of that alone, scared, confused, carrying that secret because she thought— Clara's voice dropped to a whisper. "She thought I'd be disappointed in her." The words hung heavy in the air. Hank leaned forward, his weathered hands clasped together. "That girl loves you more than anything in this world. She didn't tell you because she was trying to protect you, not because she didn't trust you." "Protect me from what?" "From exactly what you're feeling right now. From the guilt, from the pain." He paused. "Emily's a child, but she's been trying to be strong for you, just like you've been trying to be strong for her." Clara wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "I found something yesterday. A note she wrote but never gave me. It said, 'Grandma, please don't be sad. I can handle things. You've already done so much.'" Her voice broke completely. "She's 12 years old, Hank. 12. And she thought she had to handle this alone." That evening, Clara stood at the kitchen sink, staring out at the fields as twilight settled over the land. The old radio played softly in the background, a country song about going home. The other children were at Hank's house for the night. Linda Harris had suggested it might be better if Clara had some time alone to process everything. Clara knew what that really meant. They were evaluating whether she was stable enough to keep caring for them. She picked up the dish rag and began washing the same plate for the 3rd time, her movements mechanical. The phone rang. Clara dried her hands and answered. "Hello? Mrs. May? This is Detective Rodriguez from the county sheriff's office." Her heart stopped. "Yes? We've located Tom Bradley. He was picked up in Nevada trying to cross into California. We're bringing him back for questioning." Clara gripped the edge of the counter. Did he confess?" "I can't discuss details of the investigation, ma'am. But I wanted you to know we found him. Emily will need to give a statement when she's ready. After she hung up, Clara stood motionless in the kitchen, the weight of it all crushing down on her. They'd found him, the man who'd smiled at her while fixing her fence, the man who'd accepted her grateful payments and her trust, the man who'd destroyed her granddaughter's childhood. Clara walked slowly to the porch and sat on the old wooden steps. The stars were coming out, bright and indifferent against the darkening sky, and for the first time since this nightmare began, Clara allowed herself to feel something other than guilt. She felt rage, pure, burning rage. 3 days later, Clara sat across from Detective Rodriguez in a small, windowless room at the sheriff's station. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, harsh and unforgiving. "We need to go through the timeline again, Mrs. May," Rodriguez said, his pen poised over a notepad. "When did Tom Bradley first come to your property?" Clara's hands were folded tightly in her lap. "Last spring, April, I think. Maybe early May. And how did you meet him?" "He knocked on the door one morning, said he was looking for work, said he'd done farm repairs before and noticed our barn roof. Needed fixing." Rodriguez made notes. "Did he ask for references? Did you ask for his?" Clara shook her head, shame burning in her chest. "No, he seemed trustworthy. He was polite, soft-spoken, and I needed the help." "How often was he at your property?" 2, maybe 3 times a week at first. Then more frequently when we had bigger projects." She paused. "He was always very attentive to Emily." "In what way?" Clara's voice trembled. "He'd talk to her while she did her chores, bring her candy, offer to help carry things for her. I thought—" She stopped, unable to continue. Rodriguez looked up from his notes. "Mrs. May, this isn't your fault." But Clara couldn't hear those words anymore. They felt hollow. "Did you ever see anything inappropriate?" Rodriguez pressed gently. Clara closed her eyes, forcing herself to remember. "Once, I came outside and found them in the barn. Together. Emily was sitting on a hay bale, and Tom was standing close to her, talking quietly. When they saw me, Emily jumped up and ran to the house. Tom just smiled and said they were discussing the horses." "And you believed him?" "Yes." The word came out as barely a whisper. "God help me. I believed him." Rodriguez set down his pen. "Mrs. May, Tom Bradley has a history. 2 prior arrests for similar offenses in other states. Both cases were dismissed due to lack of evidence." Clara felt her stomach turn. "He's done this before?" "We believe so. And he's likely been moving from place to place, targeting vulnerable families." The room seemed to spin. Clara gripped the edge of the table. "I let a predator into my home," she said, her voice hollow. "I invited him in. I paid him. I trusted him with my granddaughter." Rodriguez leaned forward. "Mrs. May, I need you to focus. Is there anything else you remember? Any conversations, any moments that seemed off?" Clara tried to think, but her mind was fragmenting. Then something surfaced. "There was one night," she said slowly, "about 2 months ago. I heard Emily crying in her room. When I asked what was wrong, she said she'd had a bad dream. But when I tried to hug her, she pulled away." Clara's voice broke. "She never pulled away from me before." "Did you ask her about it?" "She said she was fine, and I let it go. I was so tired, and there was so much to do, and I just—" Clara couldn't finish. She buried her face in her hands and sobbed. For the first time since this nightmare began, she completely broke. The detective sat quietly, giving her space to fall apart. When she finally looked up, mascara streaking her face, he handed her a tissue. "Mrs. May, Emily's going to need you to be strong. Can you do that?" Clara wiped her eyes and nodded, though she wasn't sure she had any strength left. "We're going to build a case," Rodriguez said. "And when we do, Tom Bradley will never hurt another child again." But as Clara left the station and stepped into the afternoon sun, one thought consumed her. Emily tried to tell me. In her own way, she tried. And I didn't listen. Emily came home from the hospital on a Thursday afternoon. The house felt different to her now, like a place she barely recognized. Everything looked the same, but nothing felt safe anymore. Clara had cleaned Emily's room, changed the sheets, put fresh flowers on the nightstand. But when Emily walked in, she barely glanced around before sitting on the edge of her bed, staring at the floor. "Are you hungry, sweetheart?" Clara asked from the doorway. "I made your favorite, chicken soup." Emily shook her head. "Do you need anything? Extra pillows? A blanket?" "I'm fine, Grandma." But she wasn't fine. Clara could see it in the way the girl held herself, shoulders hunched, arms wrapped tight around her middle, as if trying to make herself smaller. Clara sat down beside her, careful to leave space between them. "Emily, we need to talk about what happened." The girl's body went rigid. "I know you're scared," Clara continued softly, "but the police need to hear from you. They need you to tell them the truth about Tom." Emily's head snapped up, her eyes wide with panic. "I can't. Baby, I know it's hard, but you don't understand." Emily's voice rose. "If I say something, everyone will know. Everyone will look at me and know what happened. They'll think I'm dirty." The word hung in the air like poison. Clara reached for her hand, but Emily pulled away. "You are not dirty," Clara said firmly. "Emily, look at me. What that man did to you, that wasn't your fault. None of this was your fault." But Emily just shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "You don't know what he said. You don't know what he told me. Then tell me." Emily looked up at her grandmother, her young face twisted with anguish. He said that if I told anyone, they wouldn't believe me. He said everyone would think I was lying, that I wanted it." Clara felt rage surge through her veins. "That is not true. We believe you. I believe you. But what about everyone else?" Emily whispered. "What about the kids at school? What about church? What about—" She trailed off, unable to finish. Clara wanted to promise that everything would be okay, that people would understand, that no one would judge her. But she couldn't lie. She'd already heard the whispers, seen the looks. She knew how cruel people could be. Instead, she said the only truth she could. "I don't know what other people will think, but I know that you are brave, and you are strong, and nothing that happened to you changes who you are." Emily looked at her for a long moment, then curled up on her side, facing the wall. "Can I be alone now?" Clara's heart broke a little more. "Of course, baby." She stood to leave, but paused at the door. "Emily, I love you. That will never change." The girl didn't respond. That night, Clara sat at the kitchen table with a cold cup of tea, staring at the phone. Detective Rodriguez had called earlier, asking when Emily would be ready to give her statement. Clara had said she didn't know. The truth was, she was terrified. Terrified of what Emily would have to relive. Terrified of what the process would do to her already fragile granddaughter. Terrified that even after everything, justice might not come. A soft knock on the door broke through her thoughts. She opened it to find Hank standing on the porch, holding a casserole dish. "Margaret made pot roast," he said. "Thought you could use a hot meal." Clara managed a weak smile. "Thank you. Come in." They sat in the kitchen, the silence comfortable between them. "How's Emily?" Hank finally asked. Scared, ashamed, angry. Clara sighed. "She won't talk to me. Won't eat. Just sits in her room staring at the walls." "She's been through hell, Clara. It's going to take time." "I know. I just wish—" She stopped, unable to put her feelings into words. Hank reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "You're doing everything you can. Don't forget that." But as Clara lay in bed that night, listening to the old house creak and settle, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was failing. Somewhere down the hall, Emily was awake too. And neither of them knew how to bridge the silence between them. The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning. Clara's hands trembled as she read the county seal. A custody hearing had been scheduled. They were questioning whether she could keep the children. Given the circumstances surrounding the minor, Emily May, and concerns regarding supervision. She set the letter down, unable to breathe. Linda Harris called minutes later. Mrs. May, I know this is hard, but the court must ensure safety. They're safe with me, Clara said weakly. The hearing will give you a chance to prove that. But how? Could she prove anything when she'd already failed? 2 days later, the bank called, 3 months behind on the mortgage. Payment needed immediately, or foreclosure would begin. Clara looked at the stack of bills: electricity, water, medical costs from Emily's hospital stay. The numbers were impossible. Her small pension barely covered food. The farm produced enough to survive, but never enough to get ahead. She walked through the property that afternoon, seeing every broken fence and sagging roof as evidence against her. That evening, Hank found her on the porch steps. Margaret and I want to help financially, he said after reading the custody letter. Clara shook her head. I can't take your money. You can, and you will, because those kids need you. But Clara wasn't sure needing her was enough anymore. That night she heard Emily crying down the hall. Caleb had nightmares. Even little Lily sensed something was wrong. The walls were closing in from every direction. The court, the bank, the whispers. And Clara didn't know how much longer she could hold on. The next morning, Clara found an envelope tucked in her mailbox with no return address. Inside was $500 in cash and a handwritten note. For Emily, you're not alone. A friend. Clara stared at the money, tears blurring her vision. She had no idea who'd left it. That afternoon, a truck pulled into her driveway. Pastor Williams stepped out, followed by 3 men from the church. Heard your fence needs mending, the pastor said simply. We're here to help. Clara tried to protest, but he raised a hand. This isn't charity, Clara. This is what community does. They worked all afternoon without asking for payment or explanation. 2 days later, Margaret Morrison arrived with groceries and a warm smile. Hank told me you've been skipping meals, she said, unpacking bags in the kitchen. That stops today. Clara broke down crying. Margaret held her without judgment. You've carried this alone long enough, Margaret whispered. Let us help carry it with you. The following week, Miss Peterson, Emily's former teacher, stopped by. She was retired now, gentle and wise. I heard what happened, she said softly. I want to testify at your hearing. Emily's a good girl and you're a good grandmother. The court needs to hear that. Clara could barely speak. You'd do that? Of course. And I'm not the only one. That evening, Hank brought news. I called some people, got you a lawyer, pro bono. His name's Daniel Foster. He specializes in family cases. Clara felt something she hadn't felt in weeks. Hope, small and fragile, but real. She wasn't fighting alone anymore. The community she thought had abandoned her was quietly gathering around her, ready to stand when she couldn't stand herself. And for the first time since finding Emily in that barn, Clara believed they might actually survive this. But survival, she was learning, was just the beginning. The hardest part was still ahead. Detective Rodriguez called on a Friday evening. Mrs. May, we need Emily to come in. Tom Bradley's arraignment is Monday. We need her statement on record before then. Clara's stomach dropped. She's not ready. I understand, but without her testimony, we don't have a strong case. His lawyer will argue lack of evidence. After hanging up, Clara walked to Emily's room. The girl sat on her bed, staring out the window at the darkening sky. Emily, we need to talk. The girl's shoulders tensed. I know. You want me to talk to the police. Only if you're ready. Emily was silent for a long moment. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she said, What if I say it and nothing happens? What if they don't believe me? Clara sat beside her carefully. Then we'll deal with that together. But baby, if you don't speak, he walks free. And he'll do this to someone else. Emily's hands clenched into fists. I hate him. I know. I hate that he made me feel like it was my fault. It wasn't. Emily finally looked at her grandmother, eyes red from crying. Will you come with me to the police station? every step of the way. That night, Clara couldn't sleep. She stood by the kitchen window, watching shadows move across the yard. A car drove slowly past the house, the third time that week. Clara couldn't see the driver, but her instincts told her something was wrong. She thought about Tom Bradley, sitting in his cell. Did he know they were building a case against him? Did he have friends who might try to intimidate them into silence? The phone rang, shattering the quiet. Clara jumped. She answered. Heavy breathing on the other end, then a click. Her hands shook as she hung up. It happened again an hour later, and again at midnight. By morning, Clara was exhausted and terrified. When Hank arrived, she told him everything. His expression darkened. "I'm staying here tonight and I'm calling Rodriguez." Clara wanted to argue, but she was too scared. The circle was tightening around them. Tom Bradley might be in jail, but his shadow still reached them. And Clara realized with cold certainty, this fight was far from over. Monday morning arrived cold and gray. Clara held Emily's hand as they walked into the police station. The girl's palm was clammy, her breathing shallow. Detective Rodriguez met them in the lobby, his expression gentle. "Emily, thank you for coming. I know this is difficult." They were led to a small room with a recording camera. A female officer sat nearby, offering a reassuring smile. "Take your time," Rodriguez said softly. "Just tell us what happened in your own words." Emily stared at the table, silent. Clara squeezed her hand. "You can do this, baby." Finally, Emily spoke. Her voice was barely audible. "He started coming around last spring. He was nice at first. He'd help me carry things, talk to me about the animals. He said I was mature for my age." She paused, swallowing hard. "Then he started touching my shoulder, my hair. He said it was just being friendly." Rodriguez nodded encouragingly. "When did it change?" Emily's voice cracked. "One day in the barn. I was alone, feeding the horses. He came up behind me and—" She couldn't finish. Clara felt tears streaming down her face, but she stayed silent, letting Emily speak. "He said nobody would believe me if I told," Emily whispered. "He said people would think I wanted it because I didn't scream. But I was scared. I didn't know what to do." "Did he threaten you?" Rodriguez asked gently. Emily nodded. "He said if I told Grandma, she'd have a heart attack. From the stress, he said I'd be responsible for killing her." Clara's breath caught. That monster had used her own health to manipulate her granddaughter. "He told me he loved me," Emily continued, her voice filled with disgust. "That we had something special, that grown-ups wouldn't understand." The room was silent except for Emily's quiet sobs. Rodriguez leaned forward. "Emily, you are incredibly brave for telling us this. What he did was criminal. None of it was your fault." After they left the station, Clara pulled Emily close in the parking lot. "I'm so proud of you," she whispered. Emily buried her face in Clara's shoulder. "I feel dirty, Grandma, like I'll never be clean again." "You are not dirty. You are a survivor." But even as Clara said the words, she knew the real battle was just beginning. Tom Bradley might face justice, but Emily would carry these scars forever. The key custody hearing was scheduled for Friday. That night, Clara couldn't sleep. She sat at the kitchen table with a pen and paper, writing letters she prayed she'd never have to give. "Dear Emily, if you're reading this, it means they've taken you away from me. I want you to know that losing you would break my heart, but I understand. I failed to protect you when you needed me most." Her hand shook as she wrote. Tears blotted the ink. She wrote one for each child. Words of love, apologies, promises that she'd fight to get them back. When she finished, she folded them carefully and placed them in envelopes with their names. At midnight, Clara walked through the house one last time, touching everything like she was memorizing it. Emily's bedroom, with the drawings taped to the wall. Caleb's toy trucks lined up by the window. Lily's stuffed rabbit on the pillow. She stood in the doorway of each room, whispering goodbye to the life she'd built. In the kitchen, the old radio played softly, a song about going home. Clara turned it off, unable to bear the irony. She stepped onto the porch and looked out at the farm, the barn where Emily had been found, the chicken coop where Lily loved to collect eggs, the fields her family had worked for generations. Everything she'd fought to keep was slipping through her fingers. The next morning, Emily found Clara asleep at the kitchen table, her head resting on her arms. The letters sat in a neat stack beside her. Emily picked one up. Her name was written on the front. She started to open it, then stopped. Something in her chest tightened. She set it down and gently shook Clara's shoulder. "Grandma." Clara woke with a start, disoriented. When she saw Emily, tears filled her eyes. "I thought you'd already be gone," she whispered. Emily's face crumpled. "I'm not going anywhere. We're not going anywhere." Clara pulled her into a fierce embrace. "I won't let them take you. I promise." Emily pulled back, looking at her grandmother with determination Clara hadn't seen in weeks. "Then let's fight," Emily said quietly. "Together." Clara nodded, wiping her tears. She gathered the letters and put them in a drawer. They wouldn't need them. Not yet. Tomorrow, they would walk into that courtroom, and Clara would fight with everything she had left, for Emily, for the children, for the family they'd built from broken pieces. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning of the hardest battle of her life. The courtroom was smaller than Clara had imagined. Cold fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting everything in a harsh, unforgiving glow. Wooden benches lined the gallery, already filled with faces, some familiar, some not. Clara recognized Mrs. Patterson from church, the clerk from the post office, even the woman from the feed store who'd whispered about her. They'd all come to watch, to judge. Clara sat at the defendant's table beside Daniel Foster, the lawyer Hank had found. He was younger than she'd expected, maybe 40, with kind eyes and a calm demeanor that should have reassured her but didn't. Behind her, Emily sat with Hank and Margaret. The girl's face was pale, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Across the aisle sat Linda Harris and 2 other representatives from Child Protective Services, their expressions professionally neutral. The judge entered, a stern woman in her 60s named Judge Patricia Harmon. Everyone stood. "Be seated," Judge Harmon said, settling into her chair and reviewing the paperwork before her. "We're here today to determine the custody arrangement for the minor. Children currently under the care of Mrs. Clara May. Mrs. May, do you understand the nature of these proceedings?" Clara stood shakily. "Yes, Your Honor." "Please be seated." Daniel Foster rose. "Your Honor, we're here to demonstrate that Mrs. May has provided a loving, stable home for her grandchildren under extremely difficult circumstances. The incident involving her granddaughter Emily was the result of a predator who manipulated his way into their lives, a predator who is now in custody facing criminal charges." The state's attorney, a sharp-faced woman named Ms. Chen, stood next. "Your Honor, while we acknowledge Mrs. May's good intentions, the facts remain. A 12-year-old child became pregnant while under her care. The state must prioritize the safety and well-being of these children." Judge Harmon looked at Clara. "Mrs. May, I've reviewed the reports. I understand you're the primary caregiver for 3 minor children while also managing a farm. Is that correct?" "Yes, ma'am." "And you were unaware of your granddaughter's pregnancy until she gave birth?" Clara's voice cracked. "I didn't know. I should have, but I didn't." "Why do you think you missed the signs?" Clara took a breath, steadying herself. "I was overwhelmed, taking care of 3 kids alone, keeping the farm running with arthritis that makes it hard to even hold a coffee cup some mornings. I was exhausted all the time. But that's not an excuse. I should have paid more attention. I should have seen what was happening." Judge Harmon's expression remained impassive. "The state argues that you lack the physical and financial resources to adequately supervise these children. How do you respond?" Daniel Foster interjected. "Your Honor, if I may call our first witness." The judge nodded. Pastor C. Williams took the stand. He spoke about Clara's dedication to her family, her involvement in the community, the sacrifices she'd made. That woman has more strength in her little finger than most people have in their whole body, he said firmly. What happened to Emily was a tragedy, but it wasn't Clara's fault. It was the fault of a predator who fooled everyone. Next came Miss Peterson, Emily's former teacher. She testified about Emily's love for her grandmother, the close bond they shared, the girls' happiness before Tom Bradley entered their lives. Emily never wanted for love or attention in that home, Miss Peterson said. Clara May is a good woman doing her best under impossible circumstances. Finally, Hank took the stand. I've known Clara for 20 years, he said. She's raised those kids with nothing but love and determination. Yes, she's struggled financially. Yes, she's gotten older and the work is harder. But those children are thriving because of her. Taking them away won't protect them, it'll destroy them. Ms. Chen cross-examined each witness, pointing out the lack of supervision, the financial instability, the missed signs of abuse. Good intentions aren't enough, she argued. These children need a home where they can be properly monitored and cared for. Then she called her own witness, a social worker who'd evaluated the home. The property is in disrepair, the woman testified. The income is insufficient, and Mrs. May's health issues raise serious questions about her ability to provide adequate supervision. Clara felt her hope crumbling with each word. Judge Harmon turned to her. Mrs. May, would you like to say anything before I make my decision? Clara stood, her legs trembling. Your Honor, I know I made mistakes. I know I should. Oh, I have seen what was happening. But I love those children more than anything in this world. They've already lost their mother. If you take them from me, they lose the only stability they have left. Her voice broke. I'm not perfect. I'm old and tired and struggling, but I'm fighting. I'm getting help. I'm from the community now. I have people supporting me. Please don't punish my grandchildren for my failures. They need me, and I need them. The courtroom was silent. Judge Harmon leaned back in her chair, studying Clara for a long moment. I'm going to take a 15-minute recess to consider my decision. She stood and left the room. Clara sank into her chair, barely able to breathe. Daniel Foster touched her shoulder reassuringly, but she couldn't feel anything except the crushing weight of uncertainty. Emily came forward and gripped her hand. Whatever happens, the girl whispered, I love you, Grandma. Clara couldn't speak. She just held on. The minutes crawled by like hours. The courtroom felt suffocating when Judge Harmon returned. Everyone stood as she entered, the rustle of fabric and nervous breathing the only sounds. Clara's heart hammered so hard she thought everyone could hear it. Judge Harmon sat, adjusted her reading glasses, and looked directly at Clara. This is one of the most difficult cases I've had to rule on, she began. On one hand, we have a grandmother who clearly loves her grandchildren and has sacrificed tremendously for them. On the other hand, we have a system designed to protect children, a system that must take seriously any situation where a child has been harmed. Clara felt Emily's hand tighten around hers. I've listened to the testimony. I've reviewed the reports, and I've considered what's truly in the best interest of these children. Judge Harmon paused. Mrs. May, you made mistakes. You were overwhelmed and you missed signs that in hindsight should have raised concerns. But those mistakes don't make you negligent. They make you human. Clara's breath caught. The predator who harmed Emily is not in this courtroom. He's in jail where he belongs. And from what I've heard today, he was sophisticated in his manipulation, not just of Emily, but of you and your entire community. The judge looked at the state's attorney. Ms. Chen, the state's concerns about resources and supervision are valid. However, removing these children from the only stable home they've known would cause more harm than good. Clara felt tears streaming down her face. Therefore, Judge Harmon continued, I'm ordering that custody remain with Mrs. Clara May, subject to the following conditions: monthly visits from a social worker, mandatory participation in a grandparent support program, and acceptance of community resources including home repairs and financial assistance. Clara collapsed into her chair, sobbing. Additionally, the judge said, her voice softening, I'm ordering the state to provide Mrs. May with a monthly stipend for kinship care. These children shouldn't have to suffer because their grandmother is doing the state's job of raising them. Daniel Foster stood. Thank you, Your Honor. Thank you. Behind Clara, she heard Hank's voice crack with emotion. Margaret was crying openly. Judge Harmon looked directly at Emily. Young lady, you've been through something no child should ever experience. But I want you to know that what happened to you was not your fault, and speaking up about it was one of the bravest things anyone can do. Your grandmother loves you, and this court is going to make sure you have the support you need. Emily nodded, tears rolling down her cheeks. Court is adjourned. The gavel came down. Outside the courthouse, Clara was immediately surrounded by people. Pastor Williams hugged her. Miss Peterson squeezed her hand. Even Mrs. Patterson from church approached, with tears in her eyes. I'm sorry, the woman whispered. I'm sorry for the things I said. I was wrong. Clara nodded, too overwhelmed to speak. Hank put his arm around her shoulders. Let's get you home. 3 weeks later, things were different. Not perfect, but different. The community that had whispered and judged had transformed into something Clara never expected. A support system. Men from the church finished repairing the barn. Women organized a meal rotation. The bank, after hearing about the judge's decision, restructured Clara's mortgage with manageable payments. Daniel Foster helped Clara apply for every assistance program available. The kinship care stipend arrived, along with food assistance and help with utilities. For the first time in years, Clara wasn't drowning. Emily was seeing a counselor twice a week. She still had nightmares, still struggled with shame and fear. But slowly, so slowly, she was beginning to heal. One afternoon, Clara found her in the chicken coop, collecting eggs like she used to. Mind if I join you? Clara asked. Emily shook her head, making room. They worked in comfortable silence for a while, the chickens clucking around their feet. Grandma, Emily said quietly. Yes, baby? I'm sorry I didn't tell you. Clara set down her basket and pulled Emily into a hug. You have nothing to be sorry for. Nothing. Do you hear me? Emily nodded against her shoulder. I'm the one who's sorry, Clara whispered. I'm sorry I didn't make you feel safe enough to tell me, but I'm here now, and I'm never going to stop fighting for you. They held each other as the afternoon sun streamed through the coop door, dust motes dancing in the golden light. 2 months after the hearing, Tom Bradley was sentenced to 20 years in prison. Clara didn't attend the sentencing. Emily wasn't ready for that. But Detective Rodriguez called to tell her the news. He won't hurt anyone else, Rodriguez said. Clara hung up and allowed herself to feel relief for the first time since this nightmare began. Justice wasn't perfect. It wouldn't erase Emily's trauma or bring back her childhood innocence. But it was something. It was closure. On a warm Saturday morning in late spring, Clara stood on the front porch watching the children play in the yard. Caleb and Jamie chased each other around the oak tree. Lily sat in the grass making a crown out of dandelions. And Emily sat on the porch steps with the baby. The infant, now 4 months old, had been placed in Clara's care after extensive evaluations. Emily had named her Hope. It was the most beautiful name Clara had ever heard. Emily looked up at Clara and smiled, a real smile, small but genuine. She smiled at me today, Emily said. A real smile, not just gas. Clara sat down beside them, looking at the tiny baby in Emily's arms. Hope had Emily's eyes and a tuft of dark hair that stuck up no matter how many times they smoothed it down. She knows she's loved, Clara said softly. Emily kissed the baby's forehead. I'm going to make sure she never feels scared like I did. I'm going to protect her. We both will, Clara said. Together. On the fence post near the barn, a pair of small pink galoshes hung drying in the sun. Emily's boots, washed clean after a morning of farm work. It was a small detail, but to Clara it meant everything. It meant Emily was reclaiming her space, reclaiming her life. The old radio inside played through the open window, a gospel song about redemption and grace. Clara looked out at the farm, at the land her family had worked for generations. The barn roof was fixed, the fence was mended, the bills were paid. It wasn't perfect. There were still hard days, still nightmares and tears and moments when the weight of everything threatened to crush her. But they were here, together, surviving. And sometimes Clara was learning, surviving was its own kind of victory. Margaret Morrison's car pulled into the driveway. She climbed out carrying a casserole dish and a bag of groceries. "Thought I'd stop by," she called cheerfully. Hank's truck followed, loaded with lumber for a project he'd insisted on starting, building a proper playhouse for. "Lily." Clara stood up, her arthritic knees protesting, but she was smiling. "Come on," she said to Emily. "Let's go help." Emily stood carefully cradling Hope and followed her grandmother down the steps. As they walked across the yard, Clara looked back at the house one more time. The paint was peeling. The porch sagged slightly, but smoke curled from the chimney and warm light glowed in the windows. It wasn't much, but it was home. And home, Clara realized, wasn't about perfection. It was about love, about fighting for each other even when everything seemed lost, about breaking the silence and standing up for what was right, even when the world judged you for it. Tom Bradley had tried to destroy them, but he'd failed. They were still standing, still fighting, still hoping. And as Clara watched Emily whisper softly to baby Hope, she understood something profound. Justice couldn't erase the past, but love, real, fierce, unbreakable love, could protect the future. The sun climbed higher in the sky, warming the earth. In the distance, a rooster crowed. And on the Morrison farm, life continued. Imperfect, difficult, beautiful. But most importantly, it continued. Together. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is break the silence. Justice doesn't erase the past, but it can protect the future.